Have you ever had the misfortune of crossing paths with that one individual whose sole purpose in life seems to be spreading negativity and stirring up trouble for everyone around them? You know, the kind of person who just thrives on chaos and misery. I'm not referring to your run-of-the-mill tough boss who pushes you to your limits, or even that one coworker who's simply difficult to get along with due to personality clashes. I'm talking about someone whose actions appear deliberately crafted to sabotage careers, slash essential budgets without justification, and generally make the lives of good, hard-working employees absolutely miserable, all while hiding behind the flimsy excuse of saving money or restructuring for the benefit of the higher-ups, who are usually completely disconnected from the realities of the daily grind and the impact of their decisions. Well, that's precisely the type of person who decided to target me, singling me out seemingly out of the blue for reasons that, at first, I really struggled to comprehend. It felt like I was being unfairly targeted, and I couldn't understand why I had become the focus of their negative attention. And I'll be completely transparent with you. He very nearly succeeded in crushing my spirit. I found myself tossing and turning, losing precious sleep night after night, constantly plagued by unexpected and overwhelming panic attacks that seemed to come from nowhere, triggered by the immense stress and pressure. I even began to seriously question whether all the years of hard work, unwavering dedication, and countless sacrifices I had made throughout my career actually meant anything at all in the cold, calculating landscape of the corporate world. But then, finally, something deep inside me just snapped. I reached my breaking point, I guess, where I simply couldn't take any more. It was at that moment that I made a firm, unwavering decision that if this guy was going to stoop to the level of playing dirty, unethical games and using underhanded tactics, then I would have no choice but to fight back, but I would do it by playing smarter. I resolved to outmaneuver him at every single turn, strategically using his own tactics against him to turn the tables and expose his true nature. By the time I had finished meticulously executing my carefully crafted plan, his career at my company was completely and irrevocably over. My boss was practically down on his knees begging me to return for my impromptu vacation, showering me with apologies and promises of change, and I ultimately walked away not only with my job completely intact and my reputation restored, but also with a massive, well-deserved raise that reflected my true value to the organization. This is the story of how I skillfully and successfully turned the tables on the corporate assassin that I have since come to affectionately, albeit sarcastically, call Sergeant Face. It's a roller coaster of a story, filled with unexpected twists, surprising turns, moments of intense stress, and ultimately, a deeply satisfying victory that proved that doing the right thing and standing up for yourself can truly pay off. If you've ever experienced the frustration and injustice of having a coworker or a boss who consistently underestimated your abilities, treated you with a profound lack of respect, or made you feel easily replaceable and utterly disposable, then I can guarantee that this story is definitely going to resonate with you on a deeply personal level. It's a universal experience to feel undervalued and mistreated in the workplace, and this story speaks directly to those feelings. And if you've ever secretly harbored the fantasy of obtaining sweet, sweet justice against those who have wronged you, without having to compromise your own integrity, stoop to their level of negativity, or even raise your voice in anger or confrontation, then I urge you to stick around and keep listening, because this is undoubtedly one of the most satisfying and poetically just revenge stories you'll hear today. It's guaranteed to fill you with a sense of hope, inspire you to stand up for yourself, and maybe even spark a few creative ideas of your own for dealing with difficult situations. Before we dive right into the truly juicy details of this incredible story, make sure you take a moment to hit that like button if you're a firm believer in the concept of workplace karma and the idea that what goes around eventually comes back around. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're a big fan of hearing true stories of poetic justice, satisfying comeuppance, and underdogs triumphing over adversity. And finally, I'm really curious to know, so let me know in the comment section down below. Have you ever personally had a coworker that you just knew, deep down in your gut, was actively gunning for you, constantly trying to undermine your hard work or sabotage your career for their own personal gain? Alright, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it and unpack all the details of this truly wild ride and explore the lessons we can learn from it. When I first started working at this particular company, I definitely wasn't hired for anything particularly glamorous, prestigious, or high profile. In fact, My official job title was basically just helper. That was literally it. No fancy or impressive title to put on my resume. No coveted corner office with breathtaking views of the city skyline. And not even the slightest hint or indication that there would be any opportunities for moving up the corporate ladder or advancing my career any time in the foreseeable future. But honestly, I wasn't really complaining all that much about it. I have always genuinely enjoyed the process of solving complex problems and fixing things that are broken, whether it's a technical issue, a broken process, or a strained relationship. And the simple truth was that this specific workplace presented a unique opportunity because it had plenty of issues that desperately needed to be addressed and resolved. You see, almost everyone I worked with on a daily basis was, to put it kindly and diplomatically, technologically, let's just say, challenged. I mean, imagine an entire team primarily composed of well-meaning baby boomers who could barely manage to properly copy and paste text from one document to another. And I'm not just talking about the fact that they didn't know all the obscure keyboard shortcuts. I mean, they would literally right-click to copy a simple piece of text, then embark on a painstaking and time-consuming hunt through endless drop-down menus and nested submenus, navigating the computer like a team of archaeologists carefully searching for a long-lost and priceless treasure, all just to paste the simplest bit of text into another field. I even remember one guy proudly demonstrating his self-proclaimed genius method for copying and pasting text. He was absolutely beaming with pride, excitedly telling me, "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it, because you won't ever have to waste valuable time retyping everything manually. Look at this, you just right-click right here on the text, then carefully scroll all the way down through this ridiculously long menu, then click on this specific menu option that sounds vaguely relevant, and then finally select the Insert Copied Item from Clipboard option." I just smiled politely and nodded my head, trying to appear impressed by his ingenuity. But on the inside, I was secretly dying a little bit and silently screaming in frustration. Because what he painstakingly took half a day to accomplish with his convoluted method, I could easily automate with just a few simple lines of code or a quick macro. And that's precisely what I quietly decided to do. Secretly, operating behind the scenes and under the radar, I built a collection of little programs, custom macros, and useful shortcuts that collectively saved my team countless hours of wasted effort, unnecessary frustration, and tedious manual labor. In fact, I meticulously calculated it all out one day, between the various automations I had created, the clever reorganizing of existing workflows that I implemented, and the streamlining of the most tedious and repetitive tasks that I accomplished. I was personally saving my team approximately 15 hours of valuable work time every single day. And that staggering amount of saved time was all on top of my own regular 8-hour workload and my other assigned responsibilities. But here's the real kicker that made the whole situation so absurd. Nobody else in the company really knew about it. Nobody had even the slightest idea just how much invisible, behind-the-scenes work I was secretly doing on a daily basis to keep everything running smoothly, efficiently, and effectively. And honestly, for the most part, I was perfectly fine with that particular arrangement. I genuinely enjoyed the feeling of being useful and helpful to my colleagues. I embraced the role of being the guy behind the curtain, quietly making everyone else's lives easier without seeking recognition or praise. At least, that was how I genuinely felt about the situation. Until the fateful day that Sergeant Face unexpectedly showed up and dramatically and irrevocably changed everything for the worse. He arrived completely unannounced, on one otherwise unremarkable morning during our regular daily team meeting. There was no fanfare, no introduction, no warning whatsoever. He had perfectly white hair that was meticulously combed in that stiff, overly corporate style that just screamed middle management and reeked of artificiality. A permanent, almost menacing scowl seemed to be permanently etched into his perpetually furrowed and scrunched-up face, as if he were constantly displeased with everything around him. And he wore these thick, dark-rimmed glasses that perched on his nose and made him look less like a normal human being and more like a predatory hawk, constantly scanning his surroundings for something to criticize. He didn't even bother to introduce himself to any of us, offer a friendly greeting, or acknowledge our presence in any way. He didn't crack a smile, make eye contact, or attempt to build any kind of rapport with the team. He simply walked into the conference room, silently sat down in the corner with a large legal pad and a pen, and began silently scribbling notes while the rest of us awkwardly and self-consciously tried our very best to ignore his unnerving presence. At first, I naively tried to reassure myself, thinking to myself, okay, well maybe he's just some consultant that the company has decided to hire on a temporary basis. Companies bring in those types of people all the time, right? Someone to come in and observe efficiency, analyze workflows, or improve processes by implementing some kind of new system or corporate buzzword. It's probably no big deal, I figured. But then, during the course of that seemingly ordinary meeting, my life took a sharp and unexpected turn for the absolute worst. It was a pivotal moment that I would never forget. Someone happened to mention a client's name in passing conversation. I, in a misguided attempt to lighten the suddenly tense and uncomfortable mood a bit, jokingly said something along the lines of, "Oh, is that the big guy with a really impressive beard?" You see, I had only recently met one new customer who fit that description. A massive dude with a jolly Santa Claus-like appearance and a booming laugh. I genuinely thought I was just being funny and making a harmless joke to inject some levity into the situation. My boss, however, quickly corrected me, saying, No, that's actually someone else entirely. You're thinking of a different client." And then we simply moved on with the rest of the meeting. Everyone chuckled politely at my minor faux pas. End of story, right? Or so I mistakenly thought. Anyway, because apparently, Sergeant Face meticulously wrote that seemingly insignificant comment down in his notes, recording it for posterity. And not just as a simple reminder of something that was said, he somehow twisted my innocent comment and weaponized it, transforming it into a full-blown attack on my professional competence and attention to detail. Within just a week of that meeting, his negative attitude and clear disdain toward me had become crystal clear and impossible to ignore. It was as if he had made it his personal mission to make my life miserable. He would pointedly and deliberately ignore me whenever I spoke up in meetings, acting as if I hadn't said anything at all or as if my comments were completely irrelevant to the discussion. And if I ever dared to ask him a simple, straightforward question, he would literally scoff in response, as if I were wasting his precious time. You know that sound I'm talking about? That disgusted little exhale that some people sometimes do when they think that you're intellectually inferior or far beneath them in some way. I honestly didn't even realize that people actually behaved that way in real life. But the answer, unfortunately and to my great dismay, was, this guy absolutely did. And then, on one fateful Friday night that I will never forget, I accidentally stumbled upon his private notes. It was a discovery that would change everything. It was late in the day, and I was feeling completely overwhelmed and drowning in an endless sea of work. People were constantly yelling at me from all directions. Critical deadlines were rapidly flying at me like speeding bullets, and I was starting to experience increasingly frequent and severe anxiety attacks at home, triggered by the immense stress of the job. That night, while I was desperately digging through our company's hopelessly convoluted and disorganized file system in search of a particularly urgent document that I needed to complete a critical task, I accidentally stumbled across a mysterious folder labeled with the cryptic title, SGTFF's Notes. Unsurprisingly, my curiosity immediately won out over my better judgment. I hesitated for only a moment before impulsively clicking on the folder to see what secrets it contained. Inside, I discovered a veritable goldmine of incredibly detailed documentation. But it wasn't filled with helpful project reports, insightful company analysis, or anything even remotely useful to my actual job. Oh no, of course not. What I found instead was far more disturbing. It was a carefully curated hit list. His personal hit list of employees who were targeted for elimination. Page after page contained detailed personal commentary and subjective assessments about various employees within the company, both positive observations and harshly negative criticisms. And right there, displayed prominently at the very top of the list in bold letters, my name. He had somehow managed to twist my harmless, well-intentioned joke into a career-ending offense, painting me as incompetent and out of touch. Word for word, he had actually written down the following damning assessment. Frosty mistakenly thought a 4 feet 10 inches, 24-year-old female patient was a 300-pound bearded man. This demonstrates a clear lack of attention to detail and is a strong indication of general incompetence and unsuitability for this role. I felt my stomach instantly drop like a lead weight plunging into the depths of the ocean. It suddenly became crystal clear to me that this guy wasn't actually here to help the company in any meaningful way. He wasn't interested in improving processes or boosting morale. His true agenda was to eliminate employees and cut costs, regardless of the human impact. His entire job and primary purpose was to travel from location to location, identify supposedly redundant employees who could be easily replaced, and then systematically get them fired in order to save the CEO money and boost the company's bottom line. And right then and there, in that moment of chilling realization, I knew with absolute certainty and unwavering conviction, I was undeniably his next target. That following weekend was pure, unadulterated hell. I barely managed to sleep at all, spending most of the nights tossing and turning in bed, consumed by anxiety and dread. Every time I closed my eyes and tried to drift off to sleep, I couldn't help but see his damning notes flashing in my mind, replaying the words over and over again. I kept imagining him sitting in important meetings, presenting my so-called mistakes and incompetence to the higher-ups, meticulously painting me as utterly useless, easily replaceable, and a drain on the company's resources. And the worst part of it all, the fact that truly kept me awake at night, was that he didn't even have the slightest clue about what I actually did for the company on a daily basis. Nobody did, except for me. All those complex programs I had created, all the incredibly time-saving automations I had implemented, all the hidden systems I had built and maintained, if I were to suddenly disappear from the scene, the entire place would quickly grind to a complete halt, descending into chaos and inefficiency. But in his narrow-minded and deeply flawed perception, I was just the helper, disposable, replaceable, just another cog in the machine that could be easily swapped out without any significant consequences. That's when something deep inside me finally and irrevocably snapped. I had reached my limit and simply couldn't take it anymore. If he genuinely wanted to see just how replaceable I truly was, then I would make absolutely sure to show him, once and for all, in a way that he would never forget. That fateful Friday night, fueled by a potent combination of righteous anger, simmering resentment, and a burning desire for justice, I sat down at my computer and carefully and methodically set up 3 separate and distinct email configurations. The first, a carefully worded email address directly to my boss, scheduled to be automatically sent at exactly 10 p.m. that night, politely and professionally stating that I would be taking 2 weeks of vacation time, effective immediately. The second, a concise company-wide notice, also scheduled to be sent automatically, going out bright and early on Monday morning at precisely 4 a.m., informing everyone that I would be completely unavailable to assist them during that 2-week period, and that any urgent issues or tasks that needed to be addressed would have to be handled internally by other members of the team in my absence. And the third email configuration? This was my absolute masterpiece of strategic planning and subtle sabotage. An automated email response, meticulously crafted to be sent to anyone who attempted to reach me via email during my absence, containing the following message. Thank you for your email. I am currently out of the office for an unknown amount of time and will have only limited access to my email during this period. For any routine requests, urgent emergencies, or even occasional items that require immediate attention, it is imperative that you reach out to Sergeant F*** face directly at insert his company email address here for assistance. Then, with one final decisive and deeply satisfying stroke, I pulled the plug on the entire operation. I systematically disabled and shut down every single automation script, every hidden system, every custom-built program, and every intricate macro that I had painstakingly created and maintained over the past several years, all of which were quietly working behind the scenes to keep the various wheels of the company turning smoothly, efficiently, and effectively. By the time I finally and triumphantly left the office building that night, it felt as if I was single-handedly cutting off the power supply to an entire city grid, plunging everything into darkness and chaos. They didn't know it yet, but I was certain that Monday morning was going to bring absolute pandemonium as everything began to break down and fall apart without my invisible hand guiding the way. Monday finally arrived, and as I had fully anticipated, My personal cell phone immediately lit up with a barrage of incoming calls from frantic coworkers, desperate managers, and increasingly irate higher-ups. However, I resolutely refused to answer a single one of them, allowing each call to go straight to voicemail. Simultaneously, my email inbox began to flood with a relentless torrent of increasingly frantic and desperate messages, all demanding my immediate attention and assistance. But I deliberately and steadfastly ignored every single one of those emails, refusing to even open them. Instead, I sat back and allowed myself to fully savor the delicious anticipation of what was unfolding back at the office. I vividly pictured my former co-workers frantically scrambling around, desperately trying to figure out why everything was suddenly breaking down, malfunctioning, and grinding to a halt. I gleefully imagined Sergeant Face, the supposed efficiency expert, being suddenly and unexpectedly bombarded with a barrage of urgent requests and technical inquiries that he had absolutely no knowledge of how to handle. However, by Wednesday, the familiar feelings of anxiety and self-doubt began to creep back into my mind, threatening to derail my carefully laid plans. I started to question whether I had gone too far, and I almost caved and gave in to the overwhelming pressure to return to work and fix everything. But then, I forced myself to stop and remember why I was doing this in the first place. I reminded myself that this was justice, that this was entirely necessary to prove my worth, and that I deserved to be treated with respect and appreciation. Finally, on Thursday afternoon, I received the long-awaited email that I had been anxiously hoping for and anticipating. It wasn't sent to my work email account, of course, because they knew that they wouldn't be able to reach me there. Instead, this particular email came directly to my personal inbox, bypassing all the corporate firewalls and protocols. And it was sent from none other than my boss himself. And the contents of that email were everything that I had been hoping for, and even more. It was the culmination of all my efforts and the validation that I had been seeking. "Frosty," he wrote, "I know that you're a smart person and that you've probably already figured out what the company had us doing with Sergeant Face and his so-called efficiency initiatives. I want you to know that I've already spoken with Sergeant FF's boss, and he will be leaving our location effective immediately." I explained to them in no uncertain terms that his progress meetings were taking us in the completely wrong direction, and that you are, in fact, one of our most valuable and indispensable employees. I hear about all the great work you do on a daily basis from everyone on the team. I definitely don't want to lose you, and I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to keep you on board. Please, let's talk when you get back from your vacation. I'm authorized to offer you a significant raise and a promotion to a more senior role. After reading those words, I sat back in my chair and allowed myself to smile for the first time in what felt like weeks. The weight of anxiety and uncertainty that had been pressing down on me finally lifted, replaced by a profound sense of relief and vindication. Sergeant Face was officially out of the picture, his mission of corporate destruction thwarted, and I was most definitely back in, more valued and appreciated than ever before. And not just in. When I confidently and triumphantly returned to the office the following Monday morning, I walked in there knowing that I had the full support of my boss and my colleagues. And I also walked in there with a whopping $10,000 raise and a well-deserved promotion. My boss even went so far as to apologize to me in person, telling me that he hadn't been given any say whatsoever in the decision to bring that guy in, and that he regretted not intervening sooner. Maybe that was entirely true, or maybe he was just telling me what I wanted to hear. But honestly, at that point, I didn't really care either way. The most important takeaway from the entire experience was this: I had successfully and decisively turned the tables on him, proving my true worth to the company in the process. I had finally shown them all exactly how valuable I truly was, not by arrogantly bragging about my accomplishments, not by desperately begging for their recognition, but simply by quietly disappearing from the scene and allowing the ensuing chaos to demonstrate my importance in a way that words never could. And when the dust finally settled and the smoke cleared, the very man who had wanted me gone was